Hey everybody, looks like my YouTube stream has connected. Just want to say hello here in the chat. Oh crap, that's easier said than done. This is always the case. All right, now I need to get my concurrent stream on Instagram started. And then we'll have live studio stream. Hey, IG friends. Now I've connected on both YouTube and IG. And it's time for a live studio stream on Thursday afternoon. I'm Rachel Pollock of the Bricoleuse YouTube channel and Instagram. Well, I guess that's not my name on Instagram, but that's been my blog name since 2006. And so forth. And today I had been hoping that I would receive the antique ribbon trims that I ordered to go on the Regency bonnet that I've been constructing on this stream for the past few weeks. But if you've seen anything about it in the news, the Postal Service is extremely delayed due to the holiday crush and also the fact that a lot of their sorting machines were destroyed before the election in dubious circumstances. So everything is taking much longer than one would hope. So the ribbons that I ordered that normally would have been here in time for this stream are not here. And it's all right because I have sort of shifted my focus to work on some different hats in the intervening time. Namely, this 1940s-esque inspired, 1940s inspired flat felt hat of a style that I looked for some research images to corroborate this, and I found several that were in this milieu of there being a cap to the back. Oh, Arlene's here in the in the Instagram feed, in the chat. I see Arlene's here, and she says, "I hope to be there soon." Hope to be there. Oh, yes. She's trying to sign on to the feed there, I suppose. The stream on YouTube has been sort of up and down. I had failure at connectivity for the last 2 weeks, interrupting my video. So it is what it is. Hopefully it'll stay connected and on both venues, and if not, then, tough luck for whoever gets dropped off. It's so hard with live streaming and how dependent upon connectivity you can be. But as I was saying, today I'm working on this flat felt 1940s hat reproduction that I don't have a research image to share with you because I don't have an exact image that I'm trying to copy. It's more a sort of an aesthetic school of thought with respect to millinery designs of the time period. And if you're a fan of 40s hats, I'm sure you've seen several like this. I've made several like this for various productions at PlayMakers Repertory, where I am the staff milliner, where there is a shaped cap that fits on closely to the back of the head. And then there's something ornamental happening in the front, whether it is a miniature version of a brimmed hat shape, or it's a sort of, in this case, what I call a glamorous crumple, where the flat felt has been dressed in such a way that it is there at the front of the hairstyle. You might have some bangs coming out from this. You might have some victory rolls swooping up on either side of this. And you definitely have some curls in the back underneath the cap of this thing. So this shape, I initially started working, I've been working with flat felt for quite a few weeks with these hats. If you're on the YouTube stream, you can see this Christmas version of the flat felt hat that I did for the past 2 or 3 streams perhaps. And that success really inspired me to start exploring other flat felt hat designs and patterns of the time period. And I have over here, actually, let me take this off of here. I could just put it on my head. I'm a fan. and show you the first stab at so this I did have a research image for. If you look back in my Instagram feed, you'll see the original fashion plate illustration where it's sort of like a garrison cap, and sort of, when you see it from the front, like a miniaturized fedora or top hat. And I used a piece of flat craft felt to pin this out on my head form and try to really sculpt the folds and dimensionality that I saw in that research image. Now I'm regretting not printing that out so I could show it to you. And I've come up with a pattern for it, I believe, that I'll true it up. This was sort of freeform pinned on the head, and I have these asymmetrically distributed 3 pleats with the fold to the inside of this little tiny miniature cap. And I've been just sort of letting this sit around in the studio where, somebody, very 1940s, 50s hat silhouette. Yes, it is. Thank you so much for that input. I see Arlene is now on Instagram TV, so maybe she was not able to sign on at the YouTube URL. Really, you can watch this either place. It's totally fine. You just get the landscape view on YouTube and then the portrait view on Instagram. So this little guy, this little hat, I need to stop gendering hats, particularly when they're not appropriate to, like, this is a traditionally women's hat style, so why would it be a guy? Anyway, I'm thinking that this, like, I would totally wear this hat, like, not made out of gray craft felt, but made out of something like this beautiful red fur felt behind me in the Christmas hat that I did a week or so ago. And so on this, I need to really decide whether I want to manipulate the distribution of these pleats in the top of this sort of mock-up sculpted hat shape, and then true up the pattern, and then I'll have a flat pattern for it that I could cut out in whatever material. It doesn't have to be a non-woven. It could be worsted wool, boucle, whatever. So I'm looking forward to making this hat, a real version of this hat from actual fashion fabric. Possibly in the coming week, which I should note that even though next Thursday is Christmas Eve, I do intend to stream live studio time. So this is not a week in which I'm canceling for the holiday. I canceled for Thanksgiving because it was on the actual holiday, but Christmas Eve is, I will be working in the studio, so I might as well stream. So that was the pattern determination of this sort of freeform pinned out felt hat. And the key here was really the fact that I had some craft felt, some inexpensive synthetic craft felt that I could use to play with shapes before I cut into the actual valuable fur felt that I have, or whatever material that I decide to make this out of. I'm really loving working with this craft felt material to determine, to more accurately determine the shapes of these hats before I cut into whatever they're really going to be made out of in the end. So with this hat, I also have a similar mock-up pattern. It's not connected together anymore because I took it apart in order to cut out this actual one, but I can show it to you. You might not be able to see the whole thing on IGTV, but you definitely can on YouTube. And we have, it's kind of like, it started out being like, if you remember from biology class what a paramecium, one-celled organism, looks like, it's kind of like a big felt paramecium that has 3 darts in the back of it to shape the cap around the occipital bone of the skull that you see here. This curvature of the hat shape at the back is what's imparted by these darts that are cut into it. And then it's kind of like, I'm just going to sort of arrange this on my own head. Then it's kind of like a ball cap with a really, really long visor. It's got this long flap that you can then crumple up into whatever kind of arrangement you'd like. So at this stage, when this still existed in hat form, I did a lot of manipulation of this flap, this extended visor, to see what sorts of shapes that I thought I could get out of it. So let me quickly put this on my head so you can see some of the ways in which I did that. So it was, I'm just gonna pin it quickly into place like these. Ooh, that's a needle. Whoops. You can imagine that these darts are sewn back up. They were sewn up when I was initially working on this, and then, like I said, I took it apart so that I could true up the pattern and then cut it into this actual heather blue felt that I am using for the actual hat. So we have this sort of clumsy looking thing here, but then I began taking tucks in it. Like my first version of playing around with this thing, I pinned some pleats into it, which I will just do the same right now, thinking that on a thinner felt you could impart some volume by boosting up the structure in a few places with pleats, so that then when I fold it back like this, those pleats give it loft and airiness. And my first version of this involved this. Oh, I also put a reverse pleat in the back of it as another option, so that then we had some volume at the back kicking up. And those were all interesting things if I were working in a thinner felt, like this felt, this gray felt. It's, like I said, it's a synthetic craft felt, so it's maybe a scant 1/8 of an inch thick, if that. It's fairly thin. And that's okay, because the other fur felts that I have, that I made my pattern reproduction from, the gridded pattern from the vintage resource, those are all fairly lightweight fur felts. But this felt that I'm working with on, that I was really drawn to, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. This felt that I'm working with on the blue clamshell of sorts is thicker. In fact, it's thick enough that I did some orbital stitching. If you can see that stitching on, there's rows and rows of stitching on this felt, partly to stabilize it and impart some directional structure to it, but also partly to thin it down, because, ooh, that's the back of the head. Partly to thin it down because the felt piece that this was originally cut from, I have an uncut one here in gray. It's an industrial felt that it's about 3/8 of an inch thick if it's not controlled with stitching. And this weight and thickness of industrial felt is something that we talk about the use of it, or the potential use of it, in the Masks and Armor class that I teach at UNC-Chapel Hill. And we talk about it because armor in ye olde times, like in pre-thermoplastic times, 60s, 70s, you'll find a lot of old armor in costume stocks that has been made out of this type of industrial felt. where they will impregnate it with some type of stabilizer. Perhaps hat sizing would be pretty expensive, so it's often more like a thinned acrylic paint or shellac to stabilize it. But they'll cut darts into it to impart curvature and use this to make like pseudo plate mail breastplates and then do a metallic finish on the outside. There are, if you've been following my Instagram for, I guess, since last spring at least, I put some images on Instagram of some sample armor that has been made using that technique. It's some vintage costumes that I found in the armor collection at UNC-Chapel Hill / PlayMakers Repertory Costume Collection that they're well-made examples of what they are, but there are so much better and lighter weight media to use for armor making now for the stage that this technique is kind of, I won't say it's obsolete, but it's definitely like low rung. You know, like if you're doing this, it's because you got $20 and a barn and you're going to put on a play. This is no longer something that a company that had decent sized budgets to support their costume production, that they wouldn't use this. They'd use thermoplastic. They might use augmented vacuum form, 3D carving, 3D printing. You know, there are many other ways to achieve that. But this is all like a huge digression about industrial felt, because this piece of industrial felt, this heather gray piece, and I'm just going to hold up this sample. The blue felt that I used for this glamorous crumple here, they came as packing material in some shipments that we recently received. You know, it's because of the pandemic, a lot of things come by mail that you used to just run right out and get. And so I've been keeping an eye out on the packing material, because a lot of it is stuff that I can repurpose to my own devices. I see Arlene's asking a question in the YouTube chat. Would that industrial felt be considered a non-traditional material or more of a new version of an old material? It is a new version of an old material. Or it's not even really a new version. It just, like, it's been around, you know, in things like manufacture of speakers for sound reduction. And, you know, this sort of industrial felt gets used in a lot of applications. And so a costumer used to, in the time when this was the material that was great technology for making armor for the stage, you would just order yourself a large sheet of it, however much you needed, and cut it out of it as if it was fabric or as if it was thermoplastic like we would use it now. And I was surprised. Like, it used to be something that was relatively difficult to get your hands on, somewhat expensive, because you were repurposing an industrial felt for not an industrial use, for an artistic use. So you'd spend a lot to get a little. And it was surprising to me that I can order some stuff to show up like fancy cheese and it's insulated with pieces of industrial felt that these came in plastic bags. So initially, if you imagine like an opaque plastic pillow is what it felt like. And I was like, this is a plastic spacer for the inside of this box, but what is inside of this plastic bag? And I cut them open and I found these pieces of industrial felt, and I was so excited because I thought, well, this is like Christmas. You know, this is something that I didn't expect to find, that just is sort of a lagniappe. It's free. It comes along with the fancy cheese or the cat toys or whatever. Well, we have ordered both of those things. I will just admit to that right now. Except don't tell Riley, because it's his Christmas present and he's not in the room right now. Not that he understands English too well. He's a cat though. He's pretty smart. Anyway, so I have a gray version and I have this blue version, and I was really interested in the prospect of using this industrial felt to create some of these freeform stitched sculpted hat shapes of the 40s. Partly because, if you are familiar with textiles that you can no longer find in the fabric store, and we bemoan the loss of flat fur felt yardage that used to be something you could run out to your fabric store in your town and buy to make yourself a skirt in the 50s and 60s. Now you don't get that. Like, you can get wool felt yardage. I think I've mentioned this before. You can buy flat wool felt, 100% wool, from Judith M. Millinery, and I'm sure other millinery suppliers. She's just the one that I'm most familiar with because they're right near here and shipping is quick, even if it comes ground. So anyway, this type of felt, this heathered looking felt, is not easy to find even in contemporary felt sold to milliners. So if you recall from the stream where I first did a reproduction of a 1940s hat from a pattern that I'd found in a research image, that hat was a heathered slate/navy. Like, it was a lovely variegated surface to it, and I think of that as very as a visual signifier that tells me this is felt that's manufactured in the 40s and 50s. And some of that, I'm sure, has to do with the fact that there was a lot of reusing and reclaiming and remanufacturing. No, don't let anything go to waste of that time period. And these felts, these industrial felts that are contemporary, God, I've got a horrible delay in YouTube. I'm so sorry for those of you guys who are hearing maybe the audio and then seeing a delayed version of the video. Anyway, these industrial felts that are contemporarily produced, like this one is blue because it is primarily composed of shredded and reformed blue jeans. And there are other elements of color in this. Like, if you look, I think on the hat here, there's a fairly prominent fleck of pink, and then here's some yellow lint. There are other colors involved in this, but because this is predominantly blue, I know this is composed of predominantly blue jeans, which also tells me that this is mostly, if not 100%, cotton fiber felt, which is another reason why I wanted to do this lines of stitching, not just to impart some structure and stability to the shape, but some structure and stability to the very felt that it's composed of itself. Because, if I really want to rip this, it doesn't take that much effort. Whereas I can rip the wool felt if I just put my back into it, but I have to try much, much harder because wool is a hair fiber, and if you've ever seen a sheep that hasn't been shorn in a while and it's got that like big, huge, thick, matted coat of wool, it's because its hair grows in little spirals. And that spiral construction is part of why it lends itself well to very stable felts, because the spiral and the hooks on the hairs, your hair has basically like little scales, the way that it grows out of your head, that they want to felt up together, the way that extremely curly hair wants to essentially felt up into dreadlocks. That's the same process is what's going on with felted wool. But with felted cotton, cotton fibers, they come from a plant. They're strands. They're straight fibers. They're very, very sleek, and they don't want to. It's hard to get them to cling on to each other. So that's how I was able to easily rip a hole in this, and that's why I know I need to be really careful with using this felt to make these hats, because a stability that I might otherwise have with a fur felt hat, wool felt hat that's been made from animal hair felt, I don't have in these cellulose felts, which is what this is definitely composed of. This gray one, I'm not entirely sure that it's 100% cotton. The lack of the blue jean element makes me think this might be a more blended fiber composition. It also feels, this feels like cotton fibers. This feels like there's perhaps some synthetic content, like when I compare the texture of this to the texture of this felt from this mock-up that I know is synthetic. You know, there's a little bit more of that plasticky hand to it. So I didn't want to cut into this until I decide what I might want to do with it, but I will definitely be burn testing this gray felt just to see if it seems like it's a blend or if it seems like it's a synthetic, because it doesn't feel the same as the cotton felt. But the cotton felt is my first exploration into repurposing contemporary industrial felt for millinery uses. I was inspired, I have to give credit where credit is due. I was inspired by a milliner that I have seen her work on Etsy, and I absolutely love it. And the hats that she does are primarily little sort of fascinator sized saucers. They're actually more fascinator sized Pac-Man. You know, there's like a bite out of them. And she works almost entirely in this gray industrial felt that she then, you know, augments with colorful trim elements. And they're really beautifully sophisticated shapes for what is essentially a little Pac-Man of packing material. And I loved the idea of using this contemporary felt for a millinery purpose. So that's where this, unfortunately I cannot remember her name. I cannot remember the name under which she sells on Etsy. I will look it up after this stream, see if I can find what her name is and drop it into the comments on these posts or into the notes on the video on YouTube, hopefully. If I can find her again. It's been a couple of years since I saw those, and it's stuck with me. It was such a good idea in terms of just a creative use of reclaimed materials, which I think is sort of a long-running theme in 20th and 21st century millinery. Is you see something that somebody else is discarding or not thinking it's worth anything, and you turn it into this glamorous, beautiful hat. So I'll tell you what stage of the development I'm at with this hat, and then I'm going to work on it. I've got some stuff set out here that I'm going to work on. So this hat, it's been sized. So I went ahead and pinned it into the shape that I want it to be in, and did a couple of initial coats of spray sizing, by which I mean ultra hold hairspray, because that's what I have here, and that seems to be a new, not new, but I see a lot of contemporary milliners acknowledging the use of ultra hold hairspray in stabilization of felt hat shapes. So I'm on that bandwagon. I'm with it. I'm good. So I sprayed 2 coats of Rave Ultra Hold on the exterior of this hat, and after those dried out completely, I flipped it over like this and sprayed in this bowl shape here, which I actually think this is kind of also a sophisticated hat shape. And it's also kind of reminiscent of those weird hats of the 40s, like the way it's sort of like a ship and that just swoops off of your hairstyle. So I think this could actually be a hat that goes this way, but my intent is that it's a hat that goes this way. And knowing that it's a cotton felt composition, I stitched it together and I let it sit for a few days while I just thought about the prospect of how to deal with the edge treatment, because I'm not I'm not fond of it essentially looking like a trimmed off blue jean hem, which is what it kind of looks like to me on the raw edge past that first set of stitches. It wants the fibers, because they're cotton, they don't want to felt up, they want to spray out, and it becomes very fuzzy, and I'm not interested in a fuzzy edge on my hat. I'm trying to stick with an aesthetic guidelines of the 40s, as opposed to a reinterpretation of 40s shapes with, you know, some sort of 21st century jazzy element, like, I don't know, mylar exploding LEDs or whatever. So that brings me to this. This is a sample. So once you imagine, cut this big paramecian shape out of a rectangle of felt that was similar to the size of the gray felt piece. I, of course, had then some corner curved arced pieces that I could use to create samples. And so I did a sample of a straight seam, sewing two pieces together. And then I did some stitching of different stitches on my domestic machine that might be useful for edge finishing. There are there's a straight up zigzag, and then there's one that's like zig, 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 big zig, 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 big zig. And then there was also the stretch stitch, which is like a zigzag, but it's like stitch, stitch, stitch to the right, stitch, stitch, stitch to the left, stitch, stitch, stitch to the right. I didn't like any of them. Like, I did them on all of the outside edges of this sample here and was just like, okay, I have a stable seam that I like, but I'm not fond of any of these machine treatments of the edge of the felt. So, here's a section where I also tested out the stability of, if I did 1/4 inch rows of stitching, 1/4 inch apart, what sort of, let me put that up there close, what sort of stability would that give the felt itself? And I was pleased with that. I could no longer jam my finger through it the way I can in the unreinforced section. But I decided that I would take my sample and do an edge finish that had millinery wire attached along the edge, and then a binding. And the binding that I've chosen to use here is this synthetic leather. This binding, we purchased it at PlayMakers, several seasons ago, like maybe 10 years ago. We bought this stuff because it was marketed online as a double fold leather binding. And we wanted to bind some edges in leather. And I told my manager, like, we needed quite a lot of it. And I was like, well, you can buy a bunch of skins and I can rotary cut it all up into strips. And that's fine. But if we're looking to save some time, then let's see if we can find pre-cut strips that we could buy. And one of our managerial assistants found this stuff. We bought it. It turned out to not be actual leather, but in fact was synthetic leather. And it was custom cut goods, so we couldn't return it. And ultimately, I see, let me pause for a moment. I see Arlene has a question in YouTube. Do you think grosgrain ribbon to edge it? Grosgrain ribbon would also be an excellent option. I do not. It is the motivator here for me to choose this pleather binding is that I have a significant amount of it, because PlayMakers, I asked my manager, what do we want to do with this stuff? Do I put it in stock? And she's like, are we ever going to use this? And I was like, probably not. She's like, yeah, so if you want to take it home, like, I'd rather have the space. I have many things in my house where we would rather have the storage space, and I would rather have the thing than donate it to, a scrap exchange or throw it in the garbage. And this is one of those. I had a significant amount of this pleather binding, and I don't have a significant amount of grosgrain ribbon, as Arlene is suggesting in the YouTube chat. Although that would be beautiful, and that would actually be more accurate to the period then, pleather is not really a 1940s feature so much, but it is evocative of a leather binding. And I think it's coming down to like, this is free and this is more to my own personal taste, and I'm making this hat for absolutely no reason other than the fact that I want to be making this hat and exploring these techniques of millinery. So if it's ever going to get worn, it needs to be something that I actually like. And I would like it if I were at work and I had access to, inch wide grosgrain that I could either custom dye to match this heathered blue felt, or custom dye to be an exciting contrast. Like, what if this was, lime green, or what if this was a sort of a celadon green on the edge of this, or a purpley gray, or I can peach would be good. I could reel off all kinds of wonderful options that I could dye grosgrain ribbon to bind this edge, particularly if I was doing this for a show at work. That would definitely be one of those moments that you as an audience member wouldn't even register what it was about the hat that made it seem of the period and custom constructed, but it would be that a designer had said, I want this hat to be bound in an eggplant purple grosgrain ribbon, and I would be dyeing it that eggplant purple and putting it on there, and it would perfectly match the heather blue and eggplant purple of the dress and the shoes, or whatever. Or not, it would contrast entirely, but I'm digressing. So this was my edge treatment sample that I did to see, like, does the wire actually impart the kind of structure that I want the edge of this hat to have? And it's not so much that I need that around the back, that as I want to be able to really control the curvature of this front crumple element. So that's really where when I initially pinned this thing out, and it was a lot more like this, I realized that my hairspray was not going to impart the kind of stability to the cotton felt that I was going to need. And of course, also another option, if I were working in my studio at the theater, would be a solvent-based shellac sizing that is much stiffer, and you can get much more extreme curvature stability out of it for something like this. But you also need to use that in a spray box or an extractor hood, and it's not something I'm going to use with just the extractor of my bathroom fan. So, not to mention I don't have any here, and I could go to work and get some, I suppose, but I would rather come up with an alternative that is something that I already have. So this is a long circuitous way to get back to saying that I'm interested in this edge finish with the synthetic leather edge binding and the wire that has been, in this case it was zigzagged on, but I think on the real one I'll slip stitch it. Well, I know that's what I'm going to do because I did put this through my machine and it worked all right for the attachment of the wire, but I do not have the power of the motor coupled with the availability of the needles that I have here in my home studio do not penetrate this quadruple layer of synthetic leather. I need to have, did I bring it in here? I need to have, or do have, a leather needle, which if you are familiar with a leather needle, is this it? Let me look and see. Yes, it is. So if you're familiar with a leather needle, and I could put it right up here and you still won't be able to see exactly what I'm talking about, but the point of a leather needle, if you could see the cross section of it, it would be a triangle. It's got 3 faces and 3 cutting edges to really penetrate leather. I need a drink of water here real quick. And it's slightly less effective at penetrating synthetic leather because it's essentially plastic, like rubbery plastic on, in this case, oh, let's see if it's on. So this is my piece of the double fold leather binding. Yes, it is on a fabric base. Sometimes it's, with pleather, you can, it's rough. Like the vinyl is sometimes just a layer of rubbery plastic, and sometimes it's got a ground that is either a knit or a woven, but it imparts some more stability to it, which is present here on this guy, on this trim. And Arlene says in the YouTube chat, free is very important, and can anyone more than 5 feet away tell that it's just not leather? And I don't believe so. I mean, you're on a video screen here. Can you tell if this is leather or not? You know, it could easily be a chrome tan garment leather, or what it is, which is plastic. So this is how I'm finishing the edge, and I'm to the point where I'm doing the next step of that, which involves wiring this edge. So this is the same shape. You know, I used my felt paramecium here as a pattern to cut out my blue felt shape. And then I used this to measure the perimeter of the finished hat to see how much wire and how much of the folded synthetic leather I would need to bind this edge. And this is the amount of the leather trim that I need. So I know that if I use this to measure out my wire as well, then I'll have the right amount of wire. And prior to this stream, I started this, but I stopped because I decided I would just work on it in the stream. And so this is a coil of millinery wire, and I have pulled off what I believe is enough of it. Now you're really gonna need to be on YouTube to see the full the full range of this wire here, and I'm gonna check the length of it against my binding that I know is the same length as the perimeter of my hat. Well, there's actually a little extra. I think I gave myself a 3-inch overlap, which is not going to overlap by 3 inches, but sometimes it grows and sometimes it shrinks, so I like to just give myself a little extra. So, do I have a pin over here? I do not. But I do have wonder clips. So I'm going to put a little wonder clip on my wire where I need to cut it. And then this is an example of repurposing, because I could go through our garage and try to find some wire cutters that I would be happy with. But all of my tools are in the tool chest at the Department of Dramatic Art, PlayMakers Costume Shop. And I leave them there because I want my graduate students to have access to them, because in some cases my own personal tool is the best one in the shop, and it's there for everybody to use because you can't really screw it up. Which is the case with the end nippers and wire cutters that I have there. So I could look around in the garage and see if my partner, Chris, has any wire cutters that I want to use, presuming that I could find them, because it's kind of a wreck in there right now. But I could also, I've used these the past 3 or 4 times during pandemic that I've needed to cut millinery wire. And these are gardening shears that you use when you need to cut a a branch, a twig that is basically about pinky sized. So I'm not going to cut my pinky with it, but like you can really get some cutting action with this curved pressure and the curved blade. So I'm going to use this to cut my wire. And then now I have my nice millinery wire coil, and I'm going to take this extra part and bend it back against the twist tie that holds this in form, so that it doesn't slowly slip out and then we have a spiral nightmare of wire coming undone and spewing all over the place. So yay, that's my remaining millinery wire. And so I've pulled it off of there, and it's got some curvature to it still, even though it was somewhat straightened. And I don't really want to fully straighten it out because the shape of this hat is not straight. It's got curvature to it. But it has, this wire has, for my taste, a little too much curvature to begin shaping it into the specific curves of this hat that I'm trying to stabilize the edge of. So what I'm doing now, and this is a technique that, if I remember, I explain it to my millinery students. I don't know this year if I did, because that class was taught asynchronously online, and it was kind of, if I wasn't there in the shop to see somebody doing something the slower way, I couldn't demonstrate a faster way. But this is a technique that I learned from Denise Wallace-Spriggs of DWS Millinery, and also the milliner at the Huntington, who was the first professional theatrical milliner that I assisted. And she always said to use your thumb and pull the wire through your hands, the pinched fingers of your hands, to straighten it out enough to then clip it onto your hat in whatever sort of configuration you need to. So, oh, welcome Beth. Beth has just joined over on Instagram. Always nice to see her coming to crochet with me from her baby nursery. So I typically will put an overlap of millinery wire at the center back of the hat, unless I can think of a reason to put it anywhere else. So when I consider the shape of this hat, like, the only other place I can think of that I might choose to put it would be, there's sort of an area here at the side where it kicks up in an arc over the ear before it has its front crumple, that I might choose to put it right here before that crumple, before that first arc, somewhere in this section. Or I might choose to, there's the same sort of thing over here, and I might choose to put it to this side of the center back. And now that I'm talking it through here on the stream, I'm interested in that idea because I have at the center back a great deal of bulk, because this is a dart that has then been pressed open, and with all of these rows of stabilization stitches, there's just a lot of bulk here at the center back, and I don't want to add even more of a doubled layer of wire overlapping back there. So I'm inclined to say that I will actually shift that overlap from the direct center back to in between. There's two darts here, or there's a center back dart and then there's two on either side. So I think I'm going to shift it to here in between my center back dart and probably this left side dart, so that my wire overlap is right here, because I also intend, or what I actually want is this hat to be worn if I'm saying how this hat is worn, it's worn at this angle. And actually, maybe I want to put it to the right side of my center back. Yes, I think that's what I want to do. So I'm going to start. Oh, I have a poor connection on. I just lost Instagram for a minute there. My connection dropped, but it looks like it's just reconnected. I've been having such horrible connectivity. YouTube just sucked for me the last 2 weeks. And it seems like I also have a delay this week on YouTube. Instagram just dropped. I apologize if I just up and disappear. I tried to attend another Milliners studio stream. Was it yesterday? And he was having issues with the audio syncing up with his stream. It was just, such a pain in the butt. I mean, it's definitely a third world problem, but frustrating. So now I'm going to start clipping my wire on to this edge. And I'm not going to put this through my sewing machine. Ooh, maybe I want to do binder clips. No, I think I want to do wonder clips. I'm not going to put this through my machine to sew this wire on, because I was able to do it when I made my little sample piece, but it was kind of the machine was kind of complaining about the bulk of the felt. And then once I tried to machine on the binding, it just definitely was like, oh no, we are not having any of that. Which I get it, it's a domestic machine. It thought it was going to just be like making quilting and baby clothes and stuff. And here I am trying to jam some millinery wire and pleather through it. Like, I would complain. Sure. Okay. So you can see I've started to shape my wire to the edge of this brim, and I'm using these are my new favorite thing, wonder clips. I guess it was maybe 2 years ago, no longer than that, 3-4 years ago. Well, let's see, I just taught millinery class, and it was not the previous, so it was 4 years ago that I had a student in my millinery class who had the opportunity after millinery, the summer after I had taught her millinery class, she had the opportunity and the funding to be able to take some millinery workshops at Judith M. Millinery Supply, and I believe they're in Indiana. And I can't even remember what those workshops were, but she made like 3 or 4 different hats. It was like a week-long masterclass kind of thing. And she came back with a set of wonder clips and showed them to me. And in terms of how you can use them in millinery and other crafting purposes, it blew my mind. I was like, I've got to have some. So especially here, when I found myself in a position to be working from my home studio, I ordered some. I have heretofore I have used alligator clips, which you normally use. Electricians use them to attach live wires to one another in electric circuits and so forth. And they're really good for attaching wire to the edge of a buckram hat, because they have alligator teeth and they grip onto the weave, the big thick weave of the buckram, and they also they're meant to hold wire. They hold the wire to it great. And I could have used them in this application. It would have been fine, but I don't have as much stability to this felt as you do with buckram, heavy buckram. And the wonder clips are really grabbing onto this somewhat fuzzy felt excellently. So I'm super excited I invested in those. I have to admit, I just searched wonder clips on Amazon because I could have ordered them from Judith M, now that I think about it, because I was ordering other millinery supplies from her. I think it just slipped my mind. Things just like fall out of my brain these days due to, I assume, pandemic and other life stress. But I'm almost through to the other side. Now it really looks like a paramecium too. And I'm going to be able to whip stitch it on here and then remold that brim in a much more stable way. But it's going to look like the most wild baseball cap you've ever seen before I get there, because I mean, well, I'll put it on after I finish this. It's pretty hilarious. I'm really excited about this hat. I haven't been aware of blue jeans in quite some time. Well, I haven't been aware. I mean, I'm wearing pants right now, trust me. But it's like definitely leggings, because I never leave the house. Like, ooh, I've got some extra. I overshot my measurement. I thought I was only going to have 3 inches, but it's actually an advantage to me that I have more like 5 inches of overlap here, because I'm trying to cut this wire with these hedge trimmers that are not actual wire cutters. So I'm going to cut the wire, and probably so that I have about an almost 2 inch, let's say 2 inch overlap of the wires there, where it's going to be doubled up underneath my synthetic leather binding. You don't want to do it, do you? There we go. All right, thank you, hedge clippers, for your assistance in this millinery project. I'm just going to throw this piece of wire away. What can I do with 2 inches of millinery wire? Now that I've thrown it away, something will come up and I'll be like, God, I wish I hadn't thrown away that millinery wire. All right. So I've come back to the very beginning, and I want to really stabilize this overlap with maybe some tripled up wonder clips so that we don't get... Actually, I'm going to do a quadruple set of wonder clips to really stabilize that overlap there at the back of the hat, because this is really like Little Bo Peep right now. It's going to be glamorous, trust me, but right now it's definitely not. Arlene asks, maybe you need a Subaru home sewing machine, circa 1950, solid steel, able to sew up to 6 layers of leather. I would love to have one of those. I actually have a pretty beefy domestic sewing machine that, or if it were operational, I would be able to use it. It belonged to my aunt, and it was part of the textile collection I inherited when she passed away. But sadly, somewhere in the move, the pedal got lost. So it's also obviously been rewired in a somewhat jury-rigged way. So I've put it on the radar of my partner, because he likes home projects that have to do with electronics. And so whenever he gets around to fixing that machine, I probably could sew this on that, because it's super beefy. Beth has a question on Instagram television. Can you show a close-up of the wonder pins? Yes, the wonder clips. I have several of them here. They're various different colors of plastic on the one side of the clip, and the other side is clear. And if you can see that cross section, the back side is flat, the clear side is flat, and the colored side is it's got a little bend in it, so it'll clamp material and leave some leeway in that clamp. Well, I mean, you could clamp where it clamps together, it can clamp very sturdily, but in this case with the wire, it's clamping very sturdily onto my felt, but then the wire is able to pass through that channel that is created by the Wonderclip pivot area. So I guess if I had, I don't know, I like these for this application, but I have also used them in other crafting applications and been pleased with how they performed. So I was just tying a knot in my thread. And I should add, these Wonder Clips, like I said, I got them on Amazon. They came from some factory in China. They were like $5 for 200, I believe. Like, I have this whole container is Wonder Clips. I was really surprised by how many I received when I thought I was just ordering like 20. Because when you get the alligator clips, like those are shockingly expensive for unusually few. You know, I think I got 10 for $5 the first set that I bought, and now I keep my eye out at like Dollar Tree and stuff, and buy them whenever I see them. Oh. Well, I might have to stitch this on by machine after all, because I have to be very careful that I'm whip stitching beyond the first line of machine stitches, because otherwise the thread wants to just pull through this somewhat fragile cotton felt. So that's all right. It's doing okay. Of course, I've said on numerous occasions I'm like the world's slowest hand stitcher, but whip stitching a wire on is about as fast as I get, so this will not be as tedious as when I was trying to, sew those trims on the hat that I donated to the charity auction way back in September, I think it was, which, by the way, I should add, that charity auction was to benefit the Crepe Myrtle Festival because they had to cancel their actual festival due to COVID-19, yada yada. They only just came and picked up those hats, like literally yesterday. I had wondered whether they were not going to do the auction after all, because I first spoke to them about donating the hats back in September and finished them October 1st, messaged them October 1st to say, hey, I got this done, you can come pick them up whenever. Here we are, December 16th, that I finally am able to hand them off. So I'm looking forward to that charity auction actually happening, and I don't know, me being able to publicize it somewhere. I don't know. I'm not really super invested in it. Like, it's not my own nonprofit, but I mean, I hope it's successful. It's for a good cause. I still have not. Somebody, I think it was Christina in the milliner in Barcelona, who recommended a good needle threader to me, which I have still not been able to acquire. So actually, let me try the other end of the thread, which I should probably say something about this thread that I'm using, because it is a special type of thread that is created just for hand sewing, and it might be my favorite thread to hand sew with. Let me just tie a knot here, and I'll show you the package, because the brand name that I have is Silamide. Oh wait, I'm wrong. The brand name that I have is NBT. See, I've always, except it's labeled as Silamide here. Anyway, it looks like this. These come in these long cardboard packages with an open window so you can see what color the thread is that you're purchasing. And this is black, but it comes in all different colors. And we have a whole drawer of this stuff at work. And I found myself like thinking, oh God, I wish I had a packet of silamide for this. And then I was like, so like buy one. When it comes, the exterior covering, the envelope, I guess, of this goes all the way down to here, but there's a perforation, and you bend it back and forth till it cracks at that perforation and pull the bottom off. And then it's wrapped around this inner cardboard holder, and you cut across this bottom part of that holder to create pieces of hand sewing thread that are twice the length of this box. And it's waxed thread, so you don't have to wax it. You often don't have to lick it to stick it through a needle, except I'm so bad at that I screwed it up. And it's really, it just speeds up your ability to just pull out another one, thread a needle, and get hand sewing again. It was originally marketed, and it even says on this, furriers. It's marketed towards the type of fine hand stitched furrier work that is really kind of no longer done very much. I mean, we teach it in our graduate program to our students, but you know, when you look inside an old coat and you see how incredibly intricately they've cut apart and reattached the hides to the pelts together to get beautiful effects on the fur side, they were using this type of thread to do it. And now I'm using this type of thread to whip stitch my wire onto my hat. So I'm using my leather needle on this only because it was already threaded up with some thread. I don't know that there's a good justification for that, because I'm, at least at this stage of the game, I'm just pushing it through cotton felt. Maybe once I get to sewing, obviously, the synthetic leather on, I will be definitely glad for the use of this leather needle. I guess it makes it a pleather needle since I'll be sewing synthetic leather. Haha. And this whip stitching is see, in buckram millinery, I think that if you sew your wire on by machine, it imparts some stability to that edge of the buckram, because it's a woven and it kind of wants to, it doesn't really want to fray because it's stabilized with the starch content, but it wants to fray. And I like having that machine stitched zigzag on the edge of it. And here, because I'm going to have this extremely stable synthetic leather binding along the edge of this whip stitching is really just to hold this wire in place until I can get it enclosed in the pleather fold. It's not, I don't have any advantage by, you know, really nailing it on here, because the felt is so fragile. It's, you know, it just needs to stay in place long enough for me to cover it up with something that then, because that fake leather binding is going to extend much farther down into the felt this way, it's really going to be the thing that stabilizes this whole edge. Before I go any farther, I want to test this and make sure that I'm happy with how it's turning out. And I am. So, you know, if you are a scholar of medieval studies, you may have seen this type of hat on people in, you know, medieval tapestries and stuff. There's a friend of mine who is not a theatrical costumer. She is a historical costumer, somebody who creates historical costumes just for the pleasure of making them, and primarily I think she wears them to historical costume conventions like Costume College. Of the thread, I mean, yes, I will post it in the notes. Arlene's asking in YouTube if I would post the name of the thread. The name of the thread is Silamide, Silamide, and I bought mine from Judith M., but I think you can buy it from Steinloff and Stoller, God and Ocean, any number of suppliers in the New York Garment District, I know for sure. You probably can't get this at Joann Fabric, but I don't know, like more cosmopolitan Joann Fabrics might even have it. But to get back to this hat shape, what it looks like right now, I read somebody's investigative paper where they were analyzing these drawings of hats that looked just like this. They looked like weird medieval baseball caps with extremely long brims on them, and were trying to figure out what the purpose was for them. Of course, I do not remember what the purpose actually was at this point, because I'm only a dress historian in as much as I need to be to get my job done. So I don't really retain that kind of information as well as I might if I was like an archivist or a scholar of historical costume. So, to digress, I started my first social media campaign today, which not related to my channel or any of the artwork, theatrical work that I'm doing. The graduate program that I teach in, the woman who is the new costume director, head of the program, and I have been talking about how we could make our program seem more open and welcoming, seem like that access is not so exclusive to people who have some sort of inside privilege. We want to expand the access and access, equity, diversity, inclusion. Basically, we want to welcome more people as applicants that otherwise might not even consider themselves to be a candidate for a graduate program in costume production, because we are attached to the drama department. But we were talking about, like, in this pandemic world where literally nobody is doing theater costuming, we still have the people who are still employed are graduates who cater to the cosplay community, and are graduates who also have like a side hustle in the historic costuming community or the burlesque community. A lot of the burlesque and cabaret and drag shows have moved online with relative success. And it's not to say that theater hasn't too, but to go back to what I'm saying, I've with my program head's approval, I have been crafting a social media campaign that we're going to run it on Instagram. I put the first post up today, and we want to just express that we are open to applications from people who do not have a theatrical background at all. That if they have a portfolio of beautiful costumes that they've made for cosplay to wear to Dragon Con, or to compete at a convention in a masquerade, or just because they like to go to a Jane Austen festival every summer in Regency garb, or they've built all of their own costumes for their burlesque or drag or strip show or whatever. That we're interested, because that is certainly an avenue of employment for our graduates, and it's something that we all have created costumes for in the past or currently, and you don't need a theatrical you don't need an undergrad degree in theater. You don't need some amazing costumes that you made for a play. If you made them for your friend to wear in her wedding, like, we want to see it, you know. Someone's asking a question here. Sunshine Bespoke is asking in YouTube, is it only for costumes? It is. We are a costume production graduate program that covers all aspects of costume making. It is not, it doesn't focus on design. Whether you take a picture of a superhero or a historical garment in an archive, we are teaching you how to draft or drape the pattern, how to do surface design on the textile, if there's a hat or a mask or armor, how to use techniques and media to make those elements of the costume that you see. So it's not just only for costumes, it's only for costume makers. So it actually, I think that a lot of the challenges that someone has when they are producing a particularly well-made cosplay costume is sort of almost more congruent with what we are teaching than someone who's making a theatrical costume in a context where they don't have enough time and they don't have enough money and they have to cut all their corners. Like, that's not ideal. That's not ideal for anybody, but certainly not for producing quality work, because you don't have time or money. Whereas often, in a cosplay context, if you're making something for yourself, you have as much money as you choose to budget. But if you're making something for a client, like I'm thinking of one of our graduates, Denise, who she primarily specializes in, she's getting a lot of work from the Star Wars universe folks she makes the Jedi Temple Guards, and she makes anything anybody wants, but that's what she keeps getting reorders from, is Jedi Temple Guards and various incarnations of Rey, and also she did a really beautiful Akasha, the vampire queen of the damned vampire. She did a really beautiful version of the headdress for that, and in my class, and put it on Etsy. And a cosplayer contacted her and wanted her to make the whole costume. So now she has made the entire Akasha look, and it's just beautiful. And that's a circumstance where you have a client that wants to pay you to fulfill this fantasy of being this character that speaks to them. Like, that is definitely a viable income stream, and definitely something that, like, somebody who wants to do that, if they want to learn from us, we want to teach them, because that's exciting. Like, somebody had to make the first one, sure, but then somebody has to make all of the ones that people are gonna wear to conventions for the rest of time. And I know that there's a contingent of, or quite a lot of the cosplay community is folks who are interested in making their own costumes for themselves. And Denise is the same way. I mean, that's actually how she prototypes her costumes for the most part, is she'll make one for herself and wear it to a convention, and a bunch of people want to take photographs of her, and it allows her to figure out exactly how much time goes into it and how she can speed up her time and do it more efficiently with different materials if need be, to work with different budget ranges. It's really just a pretty genius business model, actually. So all this is me just sort of blabbing about the fact that I launched this. We came up with this idea of doing an Instagram campaign, publicity campaign for our graduate program, in which we just basically describe what the program is and say that we welcome cosplayers. I have posts that are aimed at cosplayers and posts that are aimed at the historical interpreters / historical reproduction community, and posts that are aimed at burlesque and cabaret. And so I'm going to be running these Instagram images. It's just going to be posts and hashtags for me, trying to have folks in those populations discover that we exist, and that, like, yeah, you really could do an art degree in this if you want to, and we're actually welcome your application. Because I think that there are a lot of folks that would love to, well, probably, I'm guessing here, but I think there are probably a lot of folks that would love to study what we teach. And because theater has this really snobby, elitist reputation that is not unearned. I mean, let's face it, like, theater has historically been filled with gatekeepers, that they, even if they found out we existed, I feel like there's a certain contingent of folks that would be like, that there's not a place there for me. They don't care about the kind of costumes I make, and that's not true. So I have high hopes for it, but I'm also kind of scared about it because I've never run a social media campaign, and I feel like you have the real potential for it to blow up out of control in a way that you're like totally not expecting. So have my fingers crossed for the success of this. I hope that, if nothing else, I don't actually expect it to result in a huge number of folks applying this year, so much as I'm trying to get it on the radar of people who would be interested, and then they are inspired to assemble a portfolio, because most people don't necessarily have the application materials just lying around. Like, they might want to work on it for a year. And also, we have had applications already. I mean, we are not hurting for people to apply, but when I think about this coming year myself, and I think about the uncertainties of what's going to happen with the virus, particularly here in America, where we've completely bungled it so far, I think, well, maybe I would want to just dive into grad school and forget about things for a while, but also, who knows how long classes are going to be online delivery, and would I necessarily want to start in the midst of that? Now, last year, our incoming first years, they could have deferred their enrollment. They could have said, I'm going to take a year off. But they didn't. They came, and they've done some beautiful work so far. I'm so thrilled with our current first year class. I have no reason to expect that we wouldn't have the same sort of experience this next year, but can't see the future. Anyway, I'm going on and on. I hope that I have some positive response to that social media recruitment campaign, because I think that there are really only, last I checked, there are really only 12 programs in the country that offer a costume production focus that really cover all of the areas that we do. And I think that's short-sighted on behalf of theater. That's an example of how theater is snobby. Like, that the pinnacle of artistic production has historically been presented as design, and so we have all of these design programs when, any high production value show has one designer, maybe 5 assistants or so, and then like 100 makers. You know, like everybody works on a Broadway show. Like, have you seen Hamilton on Disney Plus? And how there's the credits scroll on forever, and they don't even enumerate all of the individual folks who work at all of the different shops who were part of the costume production on that show. I worked on Hamilton. I am not listed in the credits, and I'm not sore about that because I don't do this job so that I'll get credit on, you know, I never really thought far enough to think that Hamilton would be screened and broadcast on Disney Plus. I was just excited to be working on Women's Ensemble, which was the team that I worked on. But the point is, like, if you want to talk about jobs, it's not that there aren't jobs in this industry. It's that people don't know what the jobs are. I mean, I didn't find out this job that I have, costume crafts artisanship. I didn't find out that this was a job that you could do until I guess I had my first job, my first professional job was as a stitcher at the Boston Ballet. And that was also the first costume shop I worked at that was big enough to have a dedicated crafts artisan where that's all that person did. And it was a ballet, so there was also a dedicated shoe guy who just did nothing but changing the color of the shoes and buying the right shoes for the right dancers and so forth. Have I really, oh my God, it's 4:23. I have really gone over my time on the stream today. Really? Wow. Okay. I'm going to cut short that thought there. I mean, it was basically just like the first place I ever worked that I saw that crafts was a thing you could do was like, I think I was two or 3 years out of school before I discovered that this was even a job you could do. Anyway, I don't apologize for keeping you long because you've stayed tuned in, so you must have not been super bored. But I am going to end my stream now because I have run over, and thank you so much for hanging out with me and the studio today. And while I've been working on this weird potato chip hat that's going to turn into the glamorous crumple eventually, bound in this lovely pleather. So I'm here every Thursday, and in fact next Thursday, even though it's Christmas Eve, I plan on streaming. And I in fact have my partner ordered us matching Santa hats that are made of black velvet, and so I plan on wearing that next week because it's funny because when he gave me that, I was like, you know, I made a black velvet Santa hat in like 1999 for Christmas at a nightclub that I was working at. So it's nice to revisit the black velvet Santa hat, and that'll be just one thing more to make you want to join me on Christmas Eve if you happen to, you know, be twiddling your thumbs around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So thanks so much for coming to my studio stream, and hopefully I'll see you next week, and if not next week, then perhaps the next.